Hired to clean a billionaire's mansion, Kiana Evans never expected to cross paths with its reclusive owner. But when fate thrusts her into Ethan Lancaster's world, secrets unravel, hearts collide, and a love neither saw coming begins to take shape. Can they overcome the odds? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the small apartment as Kiana Evans hurriedly gulped down her coffee. At 30 years old, she had mastered the art of getting ready in record time. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her face was free of makeup, except for a touch of mascara. "Mom, did you take your medicine?" Kiana called out, grabbing her worn backpack from the kitchen chair. "Yes, dear," replied Maria Evans from her bedroom. "Don't worry about me. You just focus on your new job today." Kiana poked her head into her mother's room. Maria was propped up in bed, surrounded by the medical equipment that had become a permanent fixture in their lives. The cancer treatments had left her weak, but her smile remained as bright as ever. "I made you breakfast. It's in the microwave. And I left your pain pills by your water," Kiana said, checking her watch. "You're always taking care of everyone," Maria said softly. "But who takes care of you?" Kiana smiled. "I'm fine, Mom, really. This new cleaning job pays double what I was making at the hotel. If everything goes well, we might even be able to get you that new treatment Dr. Mendez mentioned." Before Maria could respond, the front door burst open, and Kiana's younger brother, Tyler, rushed in. At 22, he was a ball of energy despite working night shifts at the local factory. "Sis, you're still here. Thought you'd be gone already," he said, tossing his backpack on the sofa. "Just leaving. Did you get any sleep at all?" Tyler shrugged. "A couple hours. Don't worry, I'll be here with Mom today." Kiana grabbed her keys. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. And don't forget, Mom's meds at noon, check her blood pressure, and no visitors because of her immune system," Tyler recited. "Got it, just like yesterday and the day before. Now go, or you'll be late." With one last glance at her family, Kiana headed out. The bus ride across town took 45 minutes, giving her time to study the information she'd been given about her new workplace, Lancaster Estate, one of the most luxurious mansions in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood. The employment agency had been very clear. She was only responsible for cleaning, not interacting with the owner. Mr. Lancaster valued his privacy, and all staff were expected to be practically invisible. As the bus approached the wealthier part of town, Kiana's stomach tightened with nervousness. The houses grew larger, the gardens more manicured, until finally she stood before an imposing iron gate with a large L worked into the design. After identifying herself through the intercom, the gates swung open, revealing a long driveway, leading to what looked more like a palace than a home. The mansion was 3 stories of gleaming white stone and glass, surrounded by perfectly landscaped gardens. Mrs. Hoffman, the stern-faced housekeeper who had interviewed her, was waiting. At the entrance, "So you're on time." "Good," she said, her expression unchanged. "Follow me for the tour and instructions." As they walked through the massive house, Kiana tried not to gawk at the luxury surrounding her. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork. That probably cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. "The East Wing is completely off-limits," Mrs. Hoffman explained, pointing to a corridor blocked by elegant double doors. "That's Mr. Lancaster's private quarters. You'll clean the main areas, guest rooms, and staff quarters only." "What about Mr. Lancaster's office or other rooms he uses?" Kiana asked. Mrs. Hoffman's thin lips pressed together. "Mr. Lancaster rarely leaves his wing. When he does, it's usually when the house is empty. You won't run into him." There was something in the housekeeper's tone that sparked Kiana's curiosity. "Is he not well?" For a moment, Mrs. Hoffman's professional mask slipped. "Mr. Lancaster had an accident 2 years ago. He prefers his privacy, that's all you need to know." The tour continued with detailed instructions about which products to use on which surfaces, which rooms to prioritize, and the schedule for laundry and deep cleaning. By the time they finished, Kiana's head was spinning with information. "Any questions?" Mrs. Hoffman asked. "Just one," Kiana replied. "How many people work here? The house is huge." There's me, the gardener who comes twice a week, the chef who prepares meals and leaves, and Mr. Lancaster's nurse, she listed. And now you. We used to have more staff, but Mr. Lancaster prefers fewer people around these days. Kiana nodded, though she found it strange that such a massive house had so few people maintaining it. You can start with the main living room. Cleaning supplies are in this closet. I'll check your work before you leave today. Left alone, Kiana got to work. The house was immaculate already, making her wonder if her job was more for show than necessity. Still, she cleaned meticulously, aware that in a place like this, even a speck of dust would be noticeable. Hours passed as she worked her way through the ground floor. The house was eerily quiet, with only the occasional sound of Mrs. Hoffman's heels clicking on the marble floors as she passed by to check on Kiana's progress. Just after lunch, while Kiana was polishing a massive mirror in the hallway, she heard raised voices coming from somewhere in the house. Curiosity got the better of her, and she followed the sound to a partially open door near the forbidden east wing. "I don't care what you have to do, just find someone," a male voice shouted, deep and commanding despite its obvious frustration. "Mr. Lancaster, it's not that simple," replied a frazzled female voice. "Your nurse called in sick, and the agency can't send a replacement until tomorrow at the earliest. So I'm supposed to just sit in my own filth until tomorrow. Fantastic." Kiana stepped back, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping, but her cleaning cart bumped against the wall with a telltale clatter. The voices inside went silent. "Who's there?" demanded the male voice. Before Kiana could retreat, Mrs. Hoffman appeared. From around the corner, her face flushed with stress. Seeing Kiana, she sighed. "It's just the new cleaning girl, Mr. Lancaster," she called through the door. There was a pause. "Send her in." Mrs. Hoffman looked at Kiana, her expression a mixture of apology and warning. "Mr. Lancaster is having a difficult day. Just be professional." Swallowing hard, Kiana entered what turned out to be a luxurious study. Sitting behind a massive desk was a man who could only be Ethan Lancaster. Even seated, it was clear he was tall. His dark hair was slightly too long, as if he hadn't bothered with a haircut in months. His face was strikingly handsome, with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw covered in stubble that was just short of becoming a beard. But it was his eyes that caught Kiana's attention, deep blue and filled with a mixture of anger and something that looked like shame. She immediately noticed the wheelchair positioned beside the desk, understanding dawning on her. "So you're the new cleaning girl," he said, his tone dismissive as his eyes swept over her. Kiana straightened her shoulders. "Kiana Evans. I'm here to clean your house, not to be called girl." She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. This was her first day, and she was already talking back to her employer. But to her surprise, a flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Ethan's face before his scowl returned. "Well, Kiana Evans, it seems you've walked into a situation. My nurse has abandoned me, and Mrs. Hoffman here can't handle certain aspects of my care." Mrs. Hoffman looked mortified. "Mr. Lancaster, I'm sure we can find a solution that doesn't involve the cleaning staff." "Why not?" he challenged, a bitter edge to his voice. "I need someone to help me bathe and change. I can't do it myself, as you well know." He turned his gaze back to Kiana. "So are you willing to earn some extra money today, or are you too disgusted by the thought of touching a cripple?" The harshness of his words hung in the air. Kiana saw the pain behind his anger, the vulnerability he was trying to hide behind. Cruelty. "I'm not disgusted," she said calmly. "I helped care for my grandmother before she passed, but I don't know your routine or needs." Something in Ethan's expression shifted. Perhaps he'd expected her to refuse, to be shocked or uncomfortable. "It's not complicated," he said, his voice slightly less hostile. "I need help getting into and out of the shower. I can manage most things from there." Mrs. Hoffman interjected. "Mr. Lancaster, perhaps I should call your brother?" "No," he cut her off sharply. "Alexander is the last person I want here. He'll just use it as another opportunity to lecture me about moving into that assisted living facility." He looked at Kiana again. "I'll pay you double your daily rate for an hour of your time, yes or no?" Kiana thought about her mother, about the expensive treatments that might give her a few more years, about the stack of medical bills on their kitchen table. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'll help." 20 minutes later, Kiana found herself following Ethan's wheelchair through the forbidden East Wing. His bedroom was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens and a bed large enough for 4 people. Everything was designed for accessibility: wider doorways, lower countertops in the attached bathroom, grab bars strategically placed. "I'll tell you what to do," Ethan said as they entered the bathroom. "I don't need your pity or your conversation." Kiana nodded, keeping her expression neutral. She helped him transfer from the wheelchair to the shower bench, carefully following his instructions. When it came time to help with his clothes, she remained professional, treating the task as she would any other. What struck her was how physically fit he was. His arms and upper body were powerfully built, clearly the result of compensating for his paralyzed lower half. The accident, whatever it had been, had taken his mobility but not his strength. Throughout the process, Ethan remained silent except for necessary directions. But Kiana caught him watching her in the mirror, perhaps looking for signs of disgust or discomfort. He wouldn't find any. Her mother's illness had taught Kiana that bodies were just bodies, and everyone needed help sometimes. "You can wait outside while I shower," he finally said once he was situated on the shower bench. "I'll call when I'm done." Kiana stepped out, closing the door behind her. She took the opportunity to look around his living space, noting the absence of personal touches. No photos, no mementos. The only sign that the room belonged to someone with interests beyond basic existence was a bookshelf filled with engineering texts and architectural magazines. When Ethan called for her, she helped him dry off and dress with the same efficiency she'd shown before. As she assisted him back into his wheelchair, her hand accidentally brushed against his, and she felt him flinch at the contact. "Thank you," he said stiffly once he was settled, the words seemingly difficult for him. "Mrs. Hoffman will add the extra payment to your wages." Kiana nodded. "Is there anything else you need before I go back to my regular duties?" "No," he replied, already turning away. "You can go." She was almost to the door when his voice stopped her. "Why didn't you flinch?" he asked, his tone genuinely curious beneath the defensive layer. "When you saw my legs, when you had to touch me, everyone flinches or gets that look in their eyes." Kiana turned back to him. "My mother has cancer. She has a colostomy bag and radiation burns. My grandmother had Alzheimer's and couldn't recognize her own children near the end. Bodies break, Mr. Lancaster. It's what happens when we're lucky. Enough to live in them for a while." Ethan stared at her, clearly not expecting such an answer. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed wall of anger cracked, revealing genuine surprise. "You can go," he repeated, but his voice had lost its edge. As Kiana returned to her cleaning duties, she found herself thinking about the man in the East Wing. How long had he been hiding away in this beautiful prison? How long since someone had treated him as a man rather than a patient or an object of pity? She didn't expect to see him again. Mrs. Hoffman had made it clear that today had been an unusual circumstance. But as she cleaned, she caught herself listening for the sound of wheelchair wheels on hardwood floors. At the end of her shift, as she was gathering her things to leave, Mrs. Hoffman approached her with an envelope. "Your payment for today, including—" "There's extra service," she said, her tone careful. "Mr. Lancaster has also requested that you return tomorrow." Kiana's eyebrows rose in surprise. "For cleaning or—" "For cleaning," Mrs. Hoffman clarified. "But he specifically asked for you. That's unusual." As Kiana left the mansion and waited for her bus, she opened the envelope and gasped. The amount was triple what she'd been promised, with a note that simply read, "For your mother, E.L." She stared at the note, wondering how he knew and what it meant. One thing was certain: Ethan Lancaster was much more observant and perhaps much more complex than his bitter exterior suggested. On the bus ride home, Kiana found herself thinking about the strange day and the even stranger man she'd met. Whatever had happened to Ethan Lancaster had left more than his body broken. But for a brief moment, when she'd spoken honestly to him, she'd glimpsed something in his eyes. A flicker of the man he might have been before. She would return tomorrow, and not just for the money. Something told her there was more to Ethan Lancaster's story than a wheelchair and a bitter attitude. And despite her better judgment, She found herself wanting to discover what that something was. Kiana returned to the Lancaster mansion the next day with mixed emotions. The generous payment would cover her mother's medical bills for the month, but something else drew her back. Curiosity about the angry man in the wheelchair who had revealed a moment of unexpected kindness. As she stepped through the grand entrance, Mrs. Hoffman was waiting for her with a tense expression. "The nurse called in sick again," she said without preamble. "Mr. Lancaster is asking for you." Kiana set down her bag. "For the same reason as yesterday?" Mrs. Hoffman nodded, lowering her voice. "I should warn you, he's in a particularly difficult mood today. His brother visited this morning." "I'll manage," Kiana said, heading toward the east wing. The housekeeper's worried expression suggested this wasn't going to be easy. She knocked on Ethan's bedroom door and heard a gruff, "Come in." When she entered, she immediately felt the tension in the air. Ethan was by the window in his wheelchair, staring out at the gardens with rigid shoulders. "Mrs. Hoffman said you needed assistance," Kiana said, keeping her tone professional. Ethan didn't turn around. "My dear brother Alexander paid me a visit, brought some papers for me to sign. Apparently I'm not capable of managing my own affairs anymore." The bitterness in his voice was raw. Kiana remained quiet, sensing he wasn't finished. "He brought brochures for that fancy assisted living facility again. Says it would be better for everyone if I stopped being so stubborn." Ethan finally turned his wheelchair to face her. "Tell me, Kiana Evans, do I look like I belong in a nursing home?" Despite his obvious anger, Kiana saw the vulnerability beneath it. She studied him carefully before answering. "You look like a man who's built himself a very comfortable prison," she said honestly. His eyes widened slightly, not expecting such directness. "Excuse me?" "This house," she gestured around them. "It's beautiful, but when was the last time you left it? When was the last time you spoke to someone who wasn't paid to be here?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I didn't ask for your analysis of my life." "No, you asked if you belong in a nursing home," she replied calmly. "You don't, but you don't belong locked away in here either." For a moment, she thought she'd pushed too far. His expression darkened, and she braced herself for him to fire her on the spot. Instead, he let out a short, humorless laugh. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. Most people just nod and agree with whatever they think I want to hear." "I'm not most people," Kiana said. "Now, do you need help with your shower, or should I go back to dusting your expensive furniture?" The tension in the room eased slightly, as Ethan shook his head, almost amused by her forthrightness. "The shower, please. Then maybe you can tell me more about how I've imprisoned myself while you clean my cell." Their routine was smoother today. Kiana already knew the steps, and Ethan seemed less defensive about needing her help. As she waited outside the bathroom, while he showered, she noticed a framed architectural drawing on the wall she had missed yesterday. A sleek modern building with Lancaster Innovations written at the bottom. When Ethan called for her, she helped him dry off and dress with the same professional efficiency as before. But this time he didn't immediately dismiss her. "That drawing you were looking at," he said, adjusting his shirt. "That was the last project I designed before the accident. It was supposed to be our company's new headquarters." "You're an architect?" Kiana asked, genuinely interested. "Was," he corrected bitterly. "Hard to visit construction sites in this thing." He tapped the arm of his wheelchair. "There are successful architects who use wheelchairs," Kiana said, gathering the wet towels. "Not according to my brother. He thinks clients won't take me seriously anymore." Ethan's voice was casual, but his eyes revealed the pain behind the words. "Alexander's been running the company since the accident. He thinks it's permanent." "And what do you think?" Kiana asked. Ethan looked at her sharply. "I think my nurse conveniently keeps calling in sick, and you ask too many questions." Kiana smiled, unfazed by his attempt to push her away. "My mother says I was born asking questions. Speaking of whom, thank you for the extra money. It helped. More than you know." Something softened in Ethan's expression. "How is she?" "Fighting. The treatments are hard, but she's determined to see my brother graduate college." Kiana paused, curious. "How did you know about her?" "You mentioned her yesterday," he said, "and I saw the medical alert app on your phone when you set it down to help me. It wasn't hard to figure out. They fell into a strange routine over the next few days. The nurse remained mysteriously absent, and Kiana continued to help Ethan with his morning routine before tackling her regular cleaning duties. Their conversations grew longer, punctuated by Ethan's attempts to retreat behind sarcasm whenever the topics became too personal. One morning, as Kiana was helping him into his wheelchair, she noticed a photo tucked inside one of his books. Ethan standing beside a sleek sports car, his arm around a beautiful blonde woman. "Who is she?" Kiana asked before she could stop herself. Ethan snatched the photo and shoved it back in the book. "No one important. She doesn't look like no one important," Kiana pressed gently. After a moment of tense silence, Ethan sighed. "Vanessa, my ex-fiancée, she stuck around for 3 months after the accident, said she couldn't handle being with half a man." The pain in his voice was barely concealed beneath the sarcasm. "She sounds like a whole idiot," Kiana said firmly. Ethan looked up surprised, then let out a genuine laugh, the first Kiana had heard from him. The sound transformed his face, making him appear younger, more like the man in the photograph. "Whole idiot," he repeated, still smiling. "I've never heard it put quite that way." "Well, it's true," Kiana said, continuing with her work. "The accident didn't make you half a man. It just revealed she was half a partner." Ethan studied her with newfound interest. "You're not what I expected, Kiana Evans." "What did you expect?" she asked, gathering her cleaning supplies. "Someone who would clean my floors and pity the crippled rich man," he said bluntly. "Not someone who would call my ex an idiot and me a prisoner in my own home." "Honesty doesn't cost extra," Kiana replied with a smile. "Now I have 3 bathrooms to clean before lunch." Later that day, as Kiana was polishing the grand piano in the living room, she heard the sound of wheels on hardwood. Ethan appeared. In the doorway, a laptop balanced on his legs. "I have a design problem," he said without preamble. "I could use a fresh perspective." Kiana raised an eyebrow. "I don't know anything about architecture." "Exactly," Ethan said, rolling into the room. "You're not trained to see things the way I do. Sometimes that's valuable." He set up his laptop on the coffee table, revealing detailed plans for a building. For the next hour, he explained the project to her, a community center with accessibility features built into its very core, not added as an afterthought. "It's beautiful," Kiana said honestly, studying the graceful lines and thoughtful details. "Is this for Lancaster Innovations?" A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "No, it's just something I've been working on. Alexander doesn't know." "Why not?" "It's brilliant." "Because he'd see it as a waste of time," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "He thinks my design days are over. Then he's as much of an idiot as your ex," Kiana said matter-of-factly. Again, that surprised laugh escaped Ethan. "You really don't hold back, do you?" "Not when I see talent being wasted because of other people's limitations." She pointed to a detail in the design. "What's this? Space 4? They continued discussing the project until Mrs. Hoffman appeared, looking startled to find them working together. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Lancaster, your brother is here to see you." The easy atmosphere between Kiana and Ethan instantly evaporated. He quickly closed his laptop, his face closing off as well. "Tell him I'm busy," he said tersely. "He says it's important. Something about the Jenkins contract." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Fine. Send him to my study." As he prepared to leave, he glanced at Kiana. "Thank you for your input. It was helpful." Curious about the brother who caused such tension, Kiana made sure her cleaning duties took her near Ethan's study. The door was partially open, allowing voices to carry. "You've been missing board meetings for months," came a smooth, authoritative voice. "The investors are getting nervous." "The investors? Or you, Alexander?" Ethan replied coldly. Kiana caught a glimpse of Alexander Lancaster through the gap in the door. Tall and impeccably dressed with the same dark hair as Ethan, but none of his brother's warmth. "Both," Alexander said. "Look, Ethan, no one expects you to return to your former role, but at least make an appearance occasionally to show you're still involved." "Involved?" Ethan's voice rose. "You've been systematically pushing me out of every decision. That Jenkins design was mine, and you've completely reworked it without even consulting me." "Because your original design wasn't practical anymore," Alexander said with exaggerated patience. "You have to accept that things change. Your condition? My condition doesn't affect my mind, Ethan snapped, or my ability to design buildings. There was a heavy pause before Alexander spoke again, his voice softer but somehow more dangerous. The board is considering a vote next month on your continued role as chief architect. The silence that followed was deafening. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled fury. Get out! Ethan, be reasonable. Get out of my house. Kiana quickly moved away as the study door swung open fully. Alexander stormed out, not even noticing her as he passed. She waited a moment before approaching the study, finding Ethan staring out the window, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair so tightly his knuckles were white. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn around. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," she admitted. "Your brother doesn't seem very supportive." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Alexander has been waiting for years to take control of the company. My accident was the perfect opportunity. What will you do?" He finally turned to face her, his expression resolute. "Fight back, but I'll need to leave this house to do it." The determination in his voice made Kiana smile. "About time. I haven't been in public since the accident," he admitted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "People stare. They whisper." "Let them," Kiana said simply. "You can't control what others do, only how you respond to it." Ethan studied her as if seeing something new. Would you come with me to the office? I could use someone in my corner." The request surprised her. "I'm just your cleaning lady, Mr. Lancaster." "No," he said firmly. "You're much more than that. You're the only person who's been honest with me in 2 years." Before Kiana could respond, her phone rang Tyler's ringtone. She excused herself to answer it, instantly alarmed by her brother's panicked voice. "Kiana, you need to come home now," Mom collapsed. "We're at Memorial Hospital." Her world tilted. "I'm on my way." When she returned to the study, Ethan immediately noticed her distress. "What's wrong?" "My mother," Kiana said, already gathering her. She's in the hospital. I have to go." "I'll drive you," Ethan said without hesitation. Kiana blinked in surprise. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he cut her off. "I want to. My car has hand controls. Let me help you for a change." 20 minutes later, Kiana found herself in the passenger seat of a sleek, modified SUV, the first time Ethan had driven anywhere in months, according to Mrs. Hoffman's shocked expression as they left. At the hospital, Ethan insisted on coming inside with her. As they made their way through the corridors, Kiana noticed how people's gazes lingered on Ethan in his wheelchair. Some looked away quickly when he caught them staring. Others wore expressions of pity that made his jaw clench, but Ethan kept his focus forward, refusing to be diminished by their reactions. When they reached the waiting room, Tyler stood up, his expression a mixture of relief at seeing his sister and confusion at her companion. "How is she?" Kiana asked immediately. "Stable now," Tyler said. "Her blood pressure dropped really low. They're running tests." Kiana introduced Ethan, who insisted on staying until they received news about Maria's condition. As they waited, Kiana saw a new side of him. Patient, supportive, and unexpectedly good at distracting Tyler with questions about his engineering studies. When the doctor finally appeared with news that Maria needed additional treatments, expensive ones, Kiana felt her heart sink. The doctor left them to discuss options, and Tyler stepped out to make some calls. "I can't afford this," Kiana whispered, the weight of reality crushing down on her. Even with the extra money from the job. Ethan was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Let me help." Kiana's head snapped up. "No, I can't accept that." "Why not?" he challenged. "You've helped me more in 1 week than anyone has in 2 years. That's different. It's my job." "Telling me I've built myself a prison wasn't in your job description," he pointed out. "Neither was giving me the courage to leave my house today." Their eyes locked, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "This isn't charity, Kiana," Ethan said softly. "It's friendship." The word hung between them, simple yet profound. In the sterile hospital waiting room, something shifted in their relationship. No longer employer and employee, but two people facing different battles, finding unexpected strength in each other. "Okay," Kiana finally agreed, "but I'll pay you back somehow." Ethan smiled. "You already have." That evening, as Kiana sat by her mother's hospital bed, she thought about the strange turn her life had taken. What had begun as a simple cleaning job had become something neither she nor Ethan could have anticipated. Across town, Ethan Lancaster sat in his study, looking at the architectural plans on his computer screen with renewed purpose. For the first time in 2 years, he felt something he had thought was lost forever: hope. And it had come from the most unexpected source: a cleaning woman who saw beyond his wheelchair to the man still fighting to break free. 2 weeks had passed since Maria Evans' hospitalization. Thanks to Ethan's financial assistance, she was receiving the advanced treatments Dr. Mendez had recommended. Kiana had tried to refuse, but Ethan had been insistent, arranging everything directly with the hospital to prevent her from declining his help. "Consider it an advance on your salary," he had said when she protested. "Besides, I have more money than I know what to do with." Their relationship had changed dramatically. Though Kiana still cleaned the mansion, her duties now included helping Ethan prepare for his increasingly frequent trips to the Lancaster Innovations offices. The regular nurse had mysteriously been reassigned to another client, and Mrs. Hoffman no longer questioned Kiana's presence in the East Wing. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Kiana arrived at the mansion to find Ethan already dressed and waiting in the kitchen, his laptop open on the table. "You're up early," she remarked, setting down her bag. "Board meeting today," he replied, his expression determined. "Alexander thinks he's going to push through that vote to remove me as chief architect. He's in for a surprise." Kiana smiled, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "What's your plan?" "I'm presenting the community center design, with a few modifications based on your suggestions, actually." He turned the laptop so she could see the screen. "See how I adjusted the entry plaza?" Kiana leaned closer, their shoulders almost touching. As he explained the changes, she was increasingly aware of these small moments of closeness, the brush of his hand against hers when she handed him documents, the way his eyes lingered on her face when he thought she wasn't looking. "It's perfect," she said, genuinely impressed by the elegant design. "They'd be fools to ignore your talent." Ethan's confidence faltered slightly. "Alexander can be very persuasive, and the board hasn't seen me in months. They might think I'm not capable anymore." "Then show them they're wrong," Kiana said, firmly. "You're still the same brilliant architect you always were. The only difference is you sit down more often now." Ethan laughed, the sound becoming more natural the more time they spent together. "You have a gift for simplifying things." "Speaking of simplifying," Kiana said, checking her watch, "we should leave soon if you want to be early for that meeting, too." Her surprise, Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Come with me." "To the board meeting?" "I don't belong there, Ethan." "Neither do I, according to Alexander," he said with a wry smile. "But I want you there. You've become my good luck charm." The hesitation in his voice suggested he'd been about to say something else. Kiana felt her heartbeat quicken. "What about my cleaning duties?" she asked, trying to maintain some professional distance, even as her resolve weakened. "Mrs. Hoffman can manage for one day," Ethan insisted. "Please, Kiana," how could she refuse when he looked at her that way? "All right, but I'm not dressed for a corporate meeting." Ethan's eyes traveled over her simple uniform. "We can fix that. Consider it part of your job today." An hour later, Kiana found herself in a high-end boutique, watching in disbelief as Ethan instructed the saleswoman to bring outfit after outfit for her to try on. "This is too much," she protested, as he dismissed another dress for being not quite right. "It's necessary," he replied, his eyes lighting up as the saleswoman returned with a sleek navy blue dress. "That one. Try that one." In the fitting room, Kiana stared at her reflection, hardly recognizing herself. The dress was simple but elegant, making her look professional and confident. When she emerged, Ethan's expression made her blush. "Perfect," he said softly. By the time they arrived at Lancaster Innovations headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the heart of downtown, Kiana felt like she was living someone else's life. Employees stared as Ethan wheeled himself Through the lobby, whispers following in their wake. It was clear that his appearance was causing a stir. "Mr. Lancaster." A young woman hurried toward them, her expression a mixture of surprise and delight. "We didn't know you were coming in. Today." "Hello, Jessica," Ethan replied warmly. "I decided it was time to check in personally. Is the board assembled?" "Yes, sir. Your brother is just beginning the meeting." Jessica glanced curiously at Kiana. "This is Kiana Evans, my assistant," Ethan said, the lie coming easily. "She'll be joining us." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Kiana whispered, "Your assistant?" "It was easier than explaining you're the woman who helps me shower and has been giving me the courage to reclaim my life," he whispered back with a mischievous smile. The boardroom fell silent as Ethan wheeled himself in, Kiana a step behind. Alexander Lancaster stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from shock to barely concealed annoyance. "Ethan," he said, recovering quickly, "this is unexpected. We weren't aware you'd be joining us." "Clearly," Ethan replied dryly, positioning his wheelchair at the empty space at the head of the table. "Please don't let me interrupt. You were saying something about my continued role as chief architect?" The tension in the room was palpable. Alexander's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We were discussing the company's direction moving forward. Given your situation, we thought it might be time to consider a leadership change in the design department. My situation hasn't affected my ability to design," Ethan said firmly. "In fact, I've been working on something new." He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to Jessica. "If you wouldn't mind bringing this up on the screen." As the community center plans appeared on the large display, Ethan began to present with a confidence and passion that transformed him. Kiana watched from her seat by the wall, filled with pride as he expertly addressed questions and defended his innovative approach to accessibility. Most of the board members seemed genuinely impressed, but Alexander's expression grew increasingly sour. When Ethan finished, Alexander cleared his throat. "It's a nice concept. Rather, but hardly practical for our commercial clients. They want profit-maximizing designs, not charity projects, sir." "This isn't charity," Ethan countered. "It's innovation. Universal design principles benefit everyone, not just people with disabilities. And it opens up new markets for Lancaster innovations." "The board needs to consider what's best for the company," Alexander insisted. "And frankly, your limited mobility makes site visits and client meetings problematic." "That's why I have an assistant now," Ethan replied smoothly, gesturing to Kiana. "Problem solved." Alexander's gaze turned to Kiana, cold and calculating. "Yes, your assistant. The woman who was cleaning your house just last month." A murmur rippled through the board members. Kiana felt her cheeks burn, but kept her expression neutral. How had Alexander learned about her role? "Ms. Evans has multiple qualifications," Ethan said, his voice tight. "And her previous employment is irrelevant to this discussion." "I disagree," Alexander said, his tone falsely sympathetic. "It speaks to your judgment, Ethan. First, you isolate yourself for 2 years, refusing to participate in company operations. Then you suddenly appear with a housekeeper pretending to be an executive assistant, presenting designs that completely depart from our established brand." He turned to the board members. "This only confirms my concerns about my brother's readiness to continue in his role." Kiana saw the trap closing around Ethan. Alexander had clearly been preparing for this confrontation, laying groundwork with the board members before Ethan's arrival. She wanted to speak up, but knew it wasn't her place. To her surprise, Ethan remained calm. "You're right about one thing, Alexander. I have been isolated, by choice at first, then by habit. And during that time, you've been systematically changing. The company my father built, shifting away from the principles of design excellence toward mere profit maximization." He turned to address the entire board. "But I'm back now, and I'm not going anywhere. If you want to vote me out, go ahead. But know that I retain controlling interest in this company, something my brother seems to have conveniently forgotten to mention." Alexander's face paled. "That's not—" "Check the bylaws," Ethan continued, his voice strengthening. "My father ensured that creative control would always remain with a Lancaster who understood design. That's me, not Alexander. I've allowed my brother considerable freedom during my absence, But that ends today. The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances. It was clear that Alexander had misled them about Ethan's position in the company. An older board member finally spoke up. I think we should table this discussion for now. Ethan, it's good to have you back. Perhaps you and Alexander can work out your differences privately before we proceed. The meeting adjourned shortly after, with Alexander storming out without another word to his brother. As the room cleared, Ethan let out a long breath, the confidence he'd displayed giving way to exhaustion. Are you okay? Kiana asked softly, moving to his side. Better than I've been in years, he replied with a tired smile. Thank you for being here. I didn't do anything, she protested. You did everything, he said, his eyes meeting hers. I wouldn't have had the courage to come back if it weren't for you. As they prepared to leave, Jessica appeared at the door. Mr. Lancaster, there are several employees who'd like to say hello. They've missed you. What followed was a procession of designers, architects and other staff members coming to welcome Ethan back. Kiana stepped aside, watching as he reconnected with his team, the easy rapport suggesting he had been a well-liked leader before his accident. It was nearly evening when they finally left the building. In the car, Ethan was quieter than usual, lost in thought. You're a natural leader, Kiana said, breaking the silence. They all respect you so much. I abandoned them, Ethan replied, regret heavy in his voice. After the accident, I convinced myself they'd be better off without me, that everyone would be. It's not too late to make things right. He glanced at her. No, it's not. Starting with dinner. You must be starving. Before she could respond, he was already changing direction, driving toward an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. Kiana felt a flutter of nervousness. This was feeling less like a work relationship and more like something else entirely. The restaurant staff greeted Ethan by name, suggesting he had once been a regular. They were led to a table with a spectacular view of the sunset over the city skyline. After they ordered, Ethan raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. To new beginnings, she echoed, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened under his gaze. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from Kiana's dreams of going back to school to Ethan's ideas for reshaping his company. For those few hours, the differences in their backgrounds and circumstances seemed to fade away. Why did you really ask me to come with you today? Kiana asked as they finished dessert. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Because when I'm with you, I forget about the wheelchair. I forget about the accident. I just feel like me again. The honesty in his voice touched something deep inside her. Ethan, Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Tyler. With the apologetic smile, she answered. Kiana, you need to come home, Tyler said, his voice tight with worry. Mom's not doing well. The doctor says the treatment isn't working as they hoped. Her happiness evaporated instantly. I'll be right there. Ethan didn't ask questions, immediately calling for the check and driving Kiana to her apartment. When they arrived, he surprised her by turning off the engine. I'm coming with you, he said, leaving no room for argument. The small apartment was a stark contrast to Ethan's mansion, but he showed no reaction to the humble surroundings. His focus was entirely on supporting Kiana, as Tyler explained the situation. Maria's cancer had spread despite the treatments, and her condition was deteriorating rapidly. The doctor wants to try an experimental treatment, Tyler said, his young face lined with worry. But it's not covered by insurance. Whatever it costs, I'll cover it, Ethan said immediately. Tyler looked at him in surprise. You don't even know us. I know, Kiana, Ethan replied simply. And that's enough. Later that night, after arrangements had been made for Maria's new treatment, Kiana walked Ethan back to his car. The night air was cool, and Ethan had insisted she wear his jacket over her new dress. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You don't need to, he replied. You've given me something far more valuable than money. Kiana, what's that? A reason to get out of bed in the morning, he said softly. A reason to fight for my life again. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Kiana was acutely aware of how close they were standing. How easy it would be to lean down and... But she pulled back, confusion and doubt flooding her mind. This was her employer, a man from a completely different world. Whatever she thought she was feeling couldn't be real or wise. "It's late," she said, taking a step back. "Thank you for everything today." A flicker of disappointment crossed Ethan's face before he nodded. "Of course. Will I see you tomorrow?" I don't know. I should stay with my mother." "I understand." He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything at all, please call me." As she watched him drive away, Kiana felt torn between gratitude for his kindness and fear of the growing feelings she couldn't deny. What had started as a simple job had become complicated in ways she never anticipated. Inside, Tyler was waiting, with a knowing look. "So your boss seems pretty invested in our family." "It's not like that," Kiana said automatically. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, that man looks at you like you hung the moon." "He's just grateful I treated him like a normal person," she insisted. "Besides, we come from different worlds. Someone like him doesn't end up with someone like me." "Why not?" Tyler challenged. "Because he's rich? Because he uses a wheelchair? Or because you're scared?" Kiana didn't have an answer. Across town, Ethan returned to his mansion, which suddenly felt emptier than ever. He made his way to his study, where he found Alexander waiting for him. "Breaking and entering now, brother?" Ethan asked coldly. "I still have a key," Alexander replied, standing from the leather chair. "We need to talk about what happened today." "There's nothing to discuss. You tried to push me out and you failed." Alexander's expression hardened. "You humiliated me in front of the board." "You did that to yourself?" Ethan countered. "Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" "I thought you'd given up," Alexander admitted. "You've been hiding in this house for 2 years, wallowing in self-pity. What changed?" Ethan thought of Kiana, her directness, her compassion without pity, the way she saw him as a whole person. "I remembered who I am." Alexander studied him for a moment. "It's that cleaning woman, isn't it? I've heard the rumors from the staff. You've developed feelings for her." "Her name is Kiana," Ethan said sharply, "and my personal life is none of your business." "It is when it affects the company," Alexander argued. "Do you have any idea how it looks? The head of Lancaster Innovations involved with the help?" Ethan's temper flared. "Get out now!" "She's using you, Ethan," Alexander pressed. "She sees a meal ticket, a way to pay for her mother's medical bills. Why else would someone like her be interested in—" "Finish that sentence and I'll forget." "You're my brother," Ethan warned, his voice dangerously low. Alexander held up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine, make your mistakes, but when she breaks your heart, don't say I didn't warn you." After Alexander left, Ethan sat in the darkness of his study, doubts creeping in despite himself. Was Kiana only kind to him because of his money? The rational. Part of him rejected the idea immediately. She had been genuine from the start, even refusing his help initially. But another, more insecure part whispered that no woman could truly want him now. Vanessa's cruel words from 2 years ago echoed in his mind. "I need a whole man, Ethan, not half of one." He wheeled himself to the window, staring out at the night sky. Tomorrow would be a turning point, his official return to Lancaster Innovations, and a new chapter in his life. But tonight his thoughts were filled with Kiana and the almost moment they'd shared outside her apartment. For the first time in years, Ethan Lancaster wanted more than just his career back. He wanted a future that until recently he hadn't believed was possible. A future with someone who saw beyond his wheelchair to the man inside. But first, he needed to convince Kiana that what was growing between them was real and worth taking a chance on. The next 2 weeks brought dramatic changes to both Kiana and Ethan's lives. Kiana had taken time off to care for her mother, whose condition remained critical despite the experimental treatments. Ethan had thrown himself into reclaiming his position at Lancaster Innovations, working long hours to review designs and reconnect with clients. Despite their busy schedules, Ethan called Kiana daily to check on her mother and offer support. He had arranged for the best medical care possible, even flying in a specialist from New York. His generosity both touched and troubled Kiana, who couldn't help wondering if their growing closeness was clouded by his financial help. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Kiana sat beside her mother's hospital bed, reading aloud from one of Maria's favorite novels. Though sedated, the doctors said Maria could still hear and understand. "You always had good taste in men," Maria said suddenly, her voice weak but clear. Kiana looked up in surprise. Her mother had been drifting in and out of consciousness all day. "What do you mean?" "You're Ethan," Maria replied with a small smile. "He came by earlier when you were getting coffee. Sat with me for a while." "He's not my Ethan, Mom," Kiana corrected gently, though her heart skipped at the thought. "And he didn't tell me he was visiting. He didn't want to bother you," Maria said, her eyes drifting closed again. "But I know what I see. The way he talks about you reminds me of your father." Before Kiana could respond, her mother had fallen, back asleep. She sat there, confused by the revelation that Ethan had been visiting Maria without telling her. What else had they talked about? Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Meeting finished early. Can I stop by?" 20 minutes later, Ethan arrived at the hospital, looking tired but determined. He had a large envelope under his arm and a cautious smile for Kiana. "Mom mentioned you visited earlier," Kiana said as they walked to the hospital cafe. Ethan looked slightly embarrassed. "I hope that's okay. I wanted to check on her progress and you were taking a break." "Of course it's okay. It's just, you didn't tell me." "I didn't want you to think I was interfering," he explained. "How is she today?" Kiana's expression darkened. "The same. The doctors say the treatment needs more time, but I can see they're not optimistic." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. The simple gesture of comfort felt natural now, though it sent the same flutter through Kiana's stomach as it had the first time. "I have something to show you," he said, opening the envelope and spreading out architectural drawings. "The community center plans were approved. Construction starts next month." "Ethan, that's wonderful," Kiana exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "Alexander didn't get in the way." "He tried," Ethan admitted. "But the board was impressed by the design and—" He hesitated. "I've dedicated the building to your mother." Kiana stared at him in shock. "What?" He turned the page to show her the building's name. "The Maria Evans Community Center for Accessibility and Arts." "Why would you do that?" she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Because without you and your family, I wouldn't have found my way back," Ethan said simply. "Your mother raised an extraordinary daughter who taught me to see beyond my limitations." It seemed fitting. Kiana was speechless, overwhelmed by the gesture. Before she could find words to respond, her phone rang. Tyler, calling from their mother's room. "Kiana, you need to come back," he said, his voice breaking. "The doctor says, they say it won't be much longer." The next hours passed in a blur, full of grief and medical terms. Maria Evans' body was shutting down, the cancer finally winning its battle despite all the interventions. Ethan stayed with Kiana and Tyler, a quiet but steady presence as they said their goodbyes. In the early hours of the morning, Maria passed peacefully with her children holding her hands. Kiana's world collapsed around her, the loss of her mother, leaving her hollow despite having prepared for this moment for months. Through the fog of grief, Ethan remained a constant support, handling funeral arrangements, ensuring Kiana and Tyler had everything they needed, and giving them space to mourn. The day of the funeral was bright and sunny, a contrast to the somber occasion. The small church was filled beyond capacity, not with expensive flowers or elaborate displays, but with people. Friends, neighbors, former patients Maria had cared for as a nurse before her illness. Kiana stood beside Tyler, greeting mourners with mechanical politeness, barely registering their condolences until a familiar voice broke through her numbness. "She would have hated all this fuss," said an elegant older woman, taking Kiana's hands in her own. "But she would have loved seeing how many lives she touched." Kiana blinked in confusion, not recognizing the woman. "I'm sorry, how did you know my mother?" The woman smiled gently. "I didn't. But my son has told me so much about her, and about you, that I feel like I did." She squeezed Kiana's hands. "I'm Eleanor Lancaster, Ethan's mother." Before Kiana could process this, another person approached, Alexander Lancaster, looking uncomfortable but respectful in a dark suit. "Miss Evans," he said formally, "my condolences for your loss." Kiana nodded stiffly, remembering his accusations about her using Ethan for money. Eleanor placed a restraining hand on her elder son's arm. "Alexander came to pay his respects," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "As did I. Your mother raised a remarkable daughter." After they moved on, Kiana sought out Ethan, who was speaking quietly with Tyler near the church entrance. "Your mother and brother are here," she said, still surprised by their presence. Ethan nodded. "Mom insisted on coming. She wanted to meet you properly, though I wish it had been under different circumstances. And Alexander." "He's trying," Ethan said with a slight shrug. "Mom can be very persuasive when she wants to be." The days following, the funeral passed in a haze of paperwork and decisions. Kiana and Tyler had to deal with their mother's modest estate and the apartment they could no longer afford without her pension. Ethan offered solutions for everything. Tyler could move into campus housing with a scholarship Ethan arranged, and Kiana could stay in the guest house on his property until she decided what was next. "I can't accept that," Kiana said when he made the offer. They were sitting in her half-packed apartment, surrounded by boxes of memories. "You've done too much already." "It's just a practical solution," Ethan insisted. "The guest house sits empty and you need somewhere to stay." "People will talk," she said, voicing one of her many concerns. "Let them," he replied with a shrug. "Since when do you care what people think?" "Since it might affect your reputation," Kiana admitted. "Your brother already thinks I'm using you for your money." Ethan's expression hardened. "Alexander doesn't get a vote in my life anymore. Neither does anyone else." He took her hand. "Kiana, I'm not offering because I feel sorry for you or because I want something in return. I'm offering because I care about you." The sincerity in his voice broke through her defenses. Exhausted from grief and worry, she finally accepted. The Lancaster Estate guest house turned out to be larger than the apartment where Kiana had grown up. Situated at the edge of the property, it offered privacy while still being close to the main house. Ethan had arranged for her things to be moved, and Mrs. Hoffman had stocked the kitchen and placed fresh flowers in every room. "It's too much," Kiana said as Ethan showed her around. "It's not enough," he replied softly. That evening, sitting on the guest house porch watching the sunset, Kiana felt a strange mixture of grief and gratitude. She had lost her mother, but somehow found a support system she never expected. "Penny, for your thoughts," Ethan said, wheeling himself onto the porch with 2 glasses of wine. "Just thinking about how unpredictable life is," she replied, accepting a glass. "A few months ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I'm living in a guest house on a millionaire's estate." "Billionaire, actually," Ethan corrected with a self-deprecating smile. "Not that it matters." "It matters to some people," Kiana said, thinking of Alexander. Ethan studied her face. "But not to you. That's what makes you different, Kiana. You saw me, not my money or my wheelchair, just me." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions. Kiana took a sip of wine to steady herself. "I should get back to work soon," she said, changing the subject. "I can't stay here indefinitely." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that," Ethan said. "Lancaster Innovations needs a community outreach coordinator for the new center. Someone who understands people, who can connect with the community and ensure the center truly serves their needs." Kiana raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you," he said with conviction. "You have a natural ability to see what others need. And you understand the importance of dignity and independence, not just accessibility." "I don't have the qualifications for a corporate position like that," she protested. "You have exactly the qualifications that matter," Ethan insisted. "Everything else you can learn, and—" He hesitated. It would mean we could still see each other every day. There it was, the truth behind the job offer. Kiana's heart raced, but doubt still nagged at her. "Ethan, You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it." The next few weeks fell into a strange new pattern. Kiana settled into the guest house, Tyler moved into campus housing, and Ethan divided his time between the mansion and his office downtown. They saw each other almost daily. sharing meals and conversations that grew increasingly personal, yet both carefully avoided addressing the growing tension between them. Then came the night of the Lancaster Innovations annual gala, a lavish charity event that Ethan had insisted Kiana attend as his guest. He had sent a designer to the guest house with a selection of evening gowns, none of which Kiana felt comfortable wearing. "I don't belong at an event like this," she told Ethan when he called to check if everything was ready. "These people are your business associates and friends. I'm just the most important person in my life," Ethan finished for her. "Please come, Kiana. I need you there." How could she refuse when he put it that way? Hours later, Kiana found herself in a midnight blue gown that made her feel like a princess, her hair swept up in an elegant style that the stylist Ethan sent had insisted on. When she emerged from the guest house, Ethan was waiting in his wheelchair, looking devastatingly handsome in a tuxedo. "You are breathtaking," he said, his voice filled with admiration. The gala was held at the city's most exclusive hotel, transformed for the evening into a glittering wonderland of lights and flowers. As Ethan's guest, Kiana found herself the subject of curious glances and whispered speculation. "Ignore them," Ethan advised, as he noticed her discomfort. "They're just surprised to see me with someone after all this time." Alexander approached. Them during the cocktail hour, his smile tight but polite. "Ethan, Miss Evans, you both look well." "Thank you, Alexander," Ethan replied coolly. "Is Mother here yet?" "Just arrived. She's looking for you, actually." Alexander turned to Kiana. "That color suits you, though I imagine anything would be an improvement over a cleaner's uniform." Before Kiana could respond to the thinly veiled insult, another voice joined the conversation. "There you are." Eleanor Lancaster approached, elegant in silver gray. "Kiana, dear, I'm so glad you could come. Ethan tells me you've been instrumental in the community center project." The older woman linked her arm through Kiana's, effectively dismissing Alexander. "Come, let me introduce you to some people who are very interested in the outreach programs you're developing." As Eleanor led her away, Kiana glanced back to see Ethan engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with his brother. "Don't worry about those two," Eleanor said, following her gaze. "They've been butting heads since they were children. Alexander has always been jealous of Ethan's talent." "He doesn't seem to approve of me," Kiana said quietly. Eleanor patted her arm. "Alexander doesn't approve of anything that wasn't his idea, but Ethan—" She smiled warmly. "I haven't seen my son this alive in years. Whatever you're doing, please don't stop." The evening progressed with dinner and speeches, including a moving presentation by Ethan about the Maria Evans Community Center. Sitting at the head table beside him, Kiana felt a surreal sense of belonging and not belonging simultaneously, touched by the tribute to her mother, yet aware of the gulf between her background and the wealthy donors surrounding them. After dinner came dancing, and Kiana found herself approached by several men seeking a partner. She declined politely, aware of Ethan watching from the sidelines, unable to join in this particular activity. "You should dance if you want to," he said when she returned to the table. "Don't stay sitting because of me." "I'm not," she replied. "Honestly, I'm sitting because the only person I want to spend time with is you." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a vulnerability breaking through his confident exterior. "Kiana," he began, his voice low, "there's something I need to—" "Ethan!" Alexander's voice cut through the moment as he approached their table, a striking blonde woman on his arm. "Look who I ran into at the bar." Kiana felt Ethan tense beside her before she even registered who the woman was. From the photo she had seen months ago, she immediately recognized Vanessa, Ethan's ex-fiancée. "Hello, Ethan," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet. "It's been a long time." "Not long enough," Ethan replied coldly. "What are you doing here, Vanessa?" She gave a practiced laugh. "Alexander invited me, of course. When I heard about your comeback, I wanted to see for myself." Her gaze flicked dismissively over Kiana. "And who is this?" Before Ethan could answer, Kiana extended her hand. "Kiana Evans. I help Ethan shower when his nurse doesn't show up." The blunt introduction caused Vanessa to recoil slightly and Alexander to cough uncomfortably. Ethan, however, burst into genuine laughter. "Among other things," he added, taking Kiana's hand in his, Kiana is also the inspiration behind our newest project and the most honest person I've ever met." Vanessa's perfect smile faltered. "How nice. Alexander mentioned you'd hired help that was a bit unconventional." "Alexander talks too much," Ethan said flatly. "If you'll excuse us, Kiana and I were just leaving." Without waiting for a response, Ethan guided his wheelchair away from the table, Kiana following beside him. Once they reached a quiet alcove away from the crowd, he stopped and looked up at her with admiration. "That was brilliantly handled," he said, still smiling. "You should have seen her face." "I thought your brother was trying to help you," Kiana said, confused by Alexander's behavior. "Alexander's idea of help is pushing me back toward a woman who abandoned me when I needed her most," Ethan replied bitterly. "He thinks Vanessa is more suitable than—" He stopped abruptly. "Then, the cleaning lady?" Kiana finished for him. Ethan's expression grew serious. "That's not how I see you, Kiana. That's never been how I see you." "How do you see me?" she asked, her heart pounding. Instead of answering, Ethan reached for her hand and pulled her gently down to his level. His eyes searched hers for a moment before he leaned forward and kissed her, softly at first, then with increasing certainty as she responded. When they finally broke apart, Kiana felt dizzy with emotion. "I shouldn't have done that here," she whispered, though she couldn't bring herself to regret it. "I'm done caring what other people think," Ethan said firmly. "I've wasted 2 years of my life hiding away, ashamed of who I've become. I'm not wasting another minute." He took her hands in his. "Kiana Evans, I am completely in love with you, not because you helped me when I was at my lowest, but because you showed me I was still whole, still capable of feelings I thought were gone forever." Kiana felt tears welling in her eyes. "Ethan, there are so many reasons this is complicated. Your brother, your position, your world, none of that matters," he insisted. "The only thing that matters is how you feel. If you don't feel the same way, I'll understand. But if there's even a chance—" "I love you too," she interrupted, the words escaping before she could overthink them. "I've been fighting it because it seemed impossible, but I do." Relief and joy washed over Ethan's face. "Then nothing else matters. It's not that simple," Kiana protested weakly. "It can be," he countered. "We make it simple. I love you. You love me. Everything else is just details." As if to prove his point, he pulled her into another kiss, unconcerned about who might see them. Later that night, after they had left the gala and returned to the estate, they sat on the guest house porch talking until dawn about their fears, their hopes, and the unexpected journey that had brought them together. "What happens now?" Kiana asked as the first rays of sunlight appeared on the horizon. "Whatever we want," Ethan replied, taking her hand. "We can figure it out together." "People will talk," she said, echoing her earlier concern. "Let them," Ethan said with a smile. "Maybe they'll learn something about seeing beyond the surface." 6 months later, the Maria Evans Community Center opened its doors to the public. Ethan and Kiana stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his wheelchair positioned beside her as they welcomed the first visitors. Alexander attended with their mother, his attitude toward Kiana having gradually shifted from disdain to grudging respect as he witnessed her genuine commitment to the center's mission and to his brother's happiness. "My mother would have loved this," Kiana whispered to Ethan, as they watched children exploring the art studios designed to accommodate all abilities. "She does love it," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand, just from a different perspective now. As the day drew to a close, Ethan led Kiana to a private corner of the building's rooftop garden, a special feature he had designed specifically with this moment in mind. "I have something to ask you," he said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small velvet box. "Something I've been thinking about since the first day you told me I had built myself a prison and needed to break free." Kiana's heart raced as he opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "You've shown me that limitations only exist if we accept them," Ethan continued. "You've taught me that true love sees beyond the surface to the person within. Kiana Evans, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak through her emotion. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, She finally found her voice. "Yes," she said, leaning down to kiss him. 1,000 times, yes. From his wheelchair, Ethan Lancaster looked up at the woman who had given him back his life, his hope, and his future. The accident had taken his ability to walk, but it had ultimately led him to something far more precious, a love that saw beyond his wheelchair to the man he truly was. And Kiana, who had once entered his home as a cleaning woman, just trying to make ends meet, had found not only financial security but something she never expected, a partner who valued her honesty, her strength, and her heart. Together, they had proven that true love doesn't see limitations or social boundaries. It simply sees the person beyond the surface, the end,